In this video, we're going to create our own computer station inside of Blender, export out the assets, bring them into Substance Painter, paint them, and then finally bring them into Unity to create an interactive panel that can manipulate different objects in the world. First, the computer panel itself is going to be very simple. We're just going to create some sort of an object, something along the lines of this, that would be placed against any wall or other surface. On that, we are then going to create a variety of different buttons and inputs that we will then use inside of Unity to perform different actions. One of them might be a simple button. Another one will be a simple dial that you can move back and forth between two locations, something like this that you would slide back and forth. Then finally, we will create some sort of a handle that you can grab and then maybe move up and down, rotating it, so that you can control some other object inside of the virtual world. Let's go ahead and jump into Blender to create the initial model and unwrap the model for painting in Substance. So here I am in a blank, empty scene because I'd gone ahead and created one without a light source or box object, and then went to File, Defaults, and saved that scene for startup. Now I don't have to delete those objects when a new scene is created. I'm going to make sure that my model faces either down the Y positive or Y negative axis. If something is wrong, we can always come back in and rotate the model 180 degrees to work properly. So let's go ahead and create the basis of our model, which is just going to be a box. Let's go to Add, Mesh, and we'll create a cube. If we hit the period key on our numpad to zoom in, we can get a little bit closer to our object. If we open our object up here, we can go ahead and adjust different parameters. As you can see here, the size of the box is 2 meters. That's a bit large for what we want to, but I'm going to use the scale tool instead of these interactive ones over here. However, one thing I will do is go ahead and click and drag on those different boxes and hit 0 for all 3, so that it's back at the origin or center of my world. The orange dot is, of course, the origin for that object, its local space, or pivot as it's referred to in many other applications. We will want to make sure that pivot is in the correct place before we export so that it's easy and convenient for us to sandwich this wall against other objects. Let's go ahead and use the scale tool by hitting S to get an interactive scale. We can also then press a key on whatever axis we want to constrain it to. In this case, I want to constrain it to the X direction, which is the red vector or line you see here. So if I click X now, I will only constrain to that axis. Let's make this, say, somewhere around that wide. The overall size doesn't matter yet. We can always scale down the object before exporting. What's important is to create it here, get the proportions right when we start, and then we can futz around with getting it to the exact scale we would like inside of Unity later. Here we can see that we've resized this object to roughly 3:1 ratio. Another thing you want to do though is possibly make sure that ratio is perfect, that is, it snaps exactly at 3. The reason for this is because you might be creating your object and snapping maybe several of these panels next to each other. If it's just a tiny bit off on either side, they could intersect and not line up properly on the grid. If we go ahead and hit the N key on our keyboard, we can go ahead and see the different sizes. I'm going to make sure that's exactly 3 in this case. Now I know my object will span 3 units in that direction, and if I'm using snapping later on in my program, if I set that to some interval of 3, say 1.5, or even something like 1, I can snap it in discrete units and they'll line up perfectly each time. The control panel is going to be relatively simple. All we need to do is hit Tab to go into edit mode, hit 2 to adjust edges, and I'm going to select this edge here. I'm then going to hit Shift and Space and actually move to the Move tool, which gives me the gizmo. If you hit the G key, you'll get that interactive mode, which is constrained to the camera by default. I don't like working that way typically, so instead I use this. Now I can select that arrow, I'm axis constrained in that one direction, and bring this down. Now I have a central panel on the bottom and a sharp spot on the top. I kind of want the top to match something like I have on the bottom. Lots of different ways to do this. One simple way though is, once again, let's go ahead and hit 2 on the keyboard, select that edge. I'm going to right click this time. I'm going to bevel that edge. As you can see here, that creates a nice little gap. Now I particularly want this edge to actually be flush with this back edge. One way to do that would be to press Ctrl, Alt, and Q to go into a quad view, look at it from the side as you see here, and then if you wanted to, you could attempt to get that as close as you want to. What you'll notice is that that side is actually not really on the grid, so I can't use grid snapping. However, you can use vertex snapping and axis constraints to make sure that things line up just fine. I'm going to go ahead and get out of quad view because unless I'm trying to get things exactly perfect, I don't usually like to work in quad view. The reason for that is because I like to see the model and its proportions as I'm working in perspective mode, so I get a better understanding of how it looks as I move around. So let's go ahead and hit Shift and Tab, and that turns on snap mode, or you can press it up here. You can also click next to that. I'm going to make sure vertex is on. Now I'll select this edge, and I'll also click left mouse button on this axis, and you'll notice it moves up and down. Now, as I hold that down and move towards this vertex, you'll see it snaps to that location perfectly. And now I have a top that has a little bit of an area for me to place any additional items as I see fit as I'm designing my world. Now, I do want a little bit of a recessed area right here for the controls to actually be within. So I'm going to hit 3 to go to face mode so I can select that entire object. I'm going to right click, and we're going to use the Inset Tool. Now I can inset this a little bit, and what you'll notice is it's not exactly perfect. I'm getting it a little uneven across either side. We can of course come down here and try to modify this. You can see there's an offset even, offset relative, and several other different things. And you can play with that until you get something you like, but usually I'll end up coming back in here and making some changes to it later on. So that being said, the next thing I can do is I can hit Shift Space and go to the Scale tool, right? Now the issue here is that the Scale tool is currently set to global, as you can see here. That is, it's respecting the coordinate system of the world. I kind of want to be able to scale this, but going on this funny diagonal plane you see here. That would normally be difficult. I'd have to try to manipulate 2 axes at once, and I would never get it perfect. But if I come up here and change this to something like normal, which is a vector shooting out from the surface of the object, as you've learned from class, I can now go ahead and scale this. And once again, this is why I like working perspective. I can come here to an arbitrary view, and I can scale that until I get something that looks relatively uniform across the entire object. Now that I have that set up, we can of course change that back to global if we want to, and I'm going to extrude it inwards so that there's a central area where everything's located. I'm going to go to Extrude Faces Along Normals. Once again, I hit the right-click button to access this menu of different options. Now once I've done that, you'll see that it's moving along the surface normal. And since I've kept everything pretty well defined, it's going straight out of that surface and into that surface. I'm going to push it in just a little bit to give it some kind of depth. Now that I've done that, we could of course take some time, make things more interesting, maybe grab these 2 sides over here, right click, and inset those faces as well. And then of course, once we do that, you'll notice that some of these parts are a little odd. And we can come around and we can try to manipulate these different parts to get something that looks a little bit better. Offset even seems to be pretty good and doesn't really require me to do much else. Now we can right click, and I'm going to go ahead and do another extrude along normal, and we're just going to push that in a little bit. Once again, we're just trying to give the shape some interesting character. Since we're kind of almost done with this general shape of the area, is I can go in and start selecting different places that I would like to smooth out. Because while it is interesting to have it this hard shape, at the same time this is kind of supposed to be more of a futuristic object. So why don't we go ahead and grab all the way around some of these different edges. The thing with beveling is that you do have to be careful about which edges you select. And you also should think about whether or not those edges will ever be visible. Selecting the back side of these means I'm going to round that back edge. And since I think that these are always going to be pushed against a wall or some other location, really doesn't help me out. And I'm going to go ahead and select these parts over here too. And we can see now that I've got pretty much all these front parts of the panel selected, and we'll do this bottom part as well. I am tempted to possibly grab these areas over here as well, along the entirety of the surface, as you can see there, but I'm not going to grab the inside of this object. I don't really think I'm going to get much out of that, and it would just be adding unnecessary polygons to our object. Now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and right click, and let's go ahead and do a Bevel Edges, and then slowly start to see what we get. If we move that just a little bit, you can see I get a kind of interesting surface. If I scroll the middle mouse wheel up and down as I do this, it'll show me what it'll look like if I add additional edges. Of course, additional edges means higher poly count. So you need to be careful about how many of these you happen to add. Usually 1 seam is pretty good. 2 is usually better, but I'm going to go with 1 in this case. Now, if I need to tweak anything, I can of course come back over here and modify how this actually works. So changing the width type many times will give you a different way of having this being calculated. For instance, depth here I particularly like, but you can also do percentage or absolute value. Just kind of see which one ends up looking more correct to you. However, what you're going to notice is it seems like this object is being skewed funny. And the reason for that is because we have a scale transform being applied to this object. If we want this to actually look correct, what we should do is apply our scale before we do these operations. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control and Z to undo that operation. So let's go ahead and get out of edit mode by hitting Tab again, or coming up to this little drop down here and changing that from edit to object mode. we can clearly see that my scale is 3. Now if I select my object and hit Control and A, we'll have Apply. I'm going to go ahead and apply all transforms. In this case, the scale turns to 1, 1, 1. Now if we hit Tab again, you'll notice that I still have my selection from before. I can go ahead and right click and do Bevel Edges. And we can see that it's reacting a little bit differently this time. I'm going to go to Offset this time, and I can see that I actually enjoy how this looks. It doesn't look skewed or strange in any particular way. I'm going to click off that surface, and now we see what we have. Now another thing I like to usually do is give myself a little bit of guide geometry, specifically some sort of geometry down the center point of the object. Many times in Unity and other applications, you can snap by vertex, and having something going down the center, even if it doesn't have any functional purpose, can just assist you and your level designers in laying objects in different locations. Now in this particular case, I do have a pivot that's going to end up in the center as well, and I could rely on that. So if we right click on this object, we can go ahead and do a loop, cut, and slide. It's also the hotkey Control R. First, when you do it, you select pretty much the direction the loop is going to go around. In this case, I want it to go down the center of my object. After that, you can then slide it left or right if you want to. If you hold down the Shift key, it will slow down how it moves in case you need something more precise. Now in my case, I'm just going to pop it down somewhere there, and we can come over here and you can see my factor is negative 0.02. I just want that to be a 0, enter, and now that'll be straight down the center of my object. I can click off somewhere else, and now I have a cut right down that center line. Now one thing you might want to do, depending upon how this object is going to be used, is if you want to, you can come to the back side and actually hit the delete key, and then choose delete those faces. Why would you do this? Well, those are 2 unnecessary faces if this object is always up against the back side of a wall. However, if you plan on using it in other areas or having the back ever exposed, you may want to leave that on there. We could always go into the UVs and reduce the size of that in comparison to the rest of the different objects. Therefore, it will receive less texture space, and the other parts of the object, which are more important, will receive more. Now it's time for us to create the 3 different controls. We're going to create a button, a slider, handle that we can move either up or down or horizontally. It's entirely up to you. We can either create these as separate objects and bring them into Unity, or have them all as separate objects inside of Blender, but all within one file. It's entirely up to you and how you want to approach this problem. Before I jump into that I should start to name my objects appropriately. This is called Cube. Instead, let's call this Console. Next up, I should probably go ahead and give it a material. I'm going to go to Material Properties over here. I'm going to hit New, and then I'm going to name it Console_M. The underscore M is completely optional. It's just a naming convention I picked up from prior applications that I used. So Console_M for material. Now let's go ahead and create our different objects. If you were in edit mode and I hit tab, and now I am, and I were to add a new object to this object, it's all going to be the same polygon mesh. Because I want the button, the slider, and the handle to all have their own transforms inside of Unity, I'm going to create each of those separately instead of having them as all one mesh object. So what I'm going to do now is in object mode, I'm going to click Add, Mesh, and let's go ahead and create a cylinder. Now we have the chance to reduce the number of sides on this object because this is quite a lot. On vertices, if I click this down, you'll notice that creating something around maybe 12 or maybe 16 is going to be a good number to start with. Let's go ahead and pick 12 for now. Next up, of course, we can use the scale tool, and then we can, of course, hit the Z key for vertical, and we can make this scale down a bit. We can go to scale again, and let's pick a different axis. If I hold down Shift this time and Z, this will scale along the plane, and let's make that maybe somewhere, let's say, it'll make it a pretty big button. The next step is going to be to align this button with the surface of the object. But before I do that, one thing is that I'll probably never see the bottom of this object. So if I click it, hit tab once again, go to edit mode, I'm in face mode, click that, hit the delete key, and then choose only faces, I'll get rid of that back half. Let's go ahead, select our object, and then what we want to do is use snapping to make this automatically align to our surface. So coming back up to snapping here, make sure you have face mode selected. Now, right here I have it set to closest. That is, which part is going to snap to that is going to be the closest one. I'm going to set that to center for right now. Also, make sure you have align rotation to target selected. I'm going to have this affect both move and, of course, rotation. For right now, I'm going to select my object, and since I already have snap enabled, or hit Shift Tab if you don't, So now if I click G and move this around, you'll notice that it kind of flips around to the wrong side, but that's okay. All that matters really here is that we get the rotation correct. So I'll go ahead and click, and we can come over to rotation and just zero out some of these that are incredibly small numbers. Roughly our surface is about a negative 124 degrees. What we can do is, of course, flip that around. So instead we can do 180 minus that value and hit enter, and it's going to flip that around 180 degrees. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift and Space key and go to move. Once again, you'll notice it's set to global. We want to click on that, and let's use local instead and see what that has. So I'm going to go ahead and turn snapping off, and then click drag this out a bit from the surface. I'm not going to have it all the way. If we wanted to, we could position it so it's right directly on that surface, but just close enough should be fine. What I want inside of Unity is when you decide to interact with this object, I want it to press in and then come back out as an animation. Select your object, hit Tab to go to Edit Mode, hit 2 to go to Edge Mode, and I'm going to Alt-click, double-click one of the edges to select the entire ring around the surface. I'm going to right-click then, and then we're going to go to Bevel Edges again. And here you can see what's going on, but once again that bevel looks kind of off. Whenever we see tools seemingly not working properly, all we have to do is go in and check our scales. And once again, notice that we have almost a 6:1 scale ratio on these different axes. So hit Control and A. I'm going to go ahead and apply scale in this case. I'm going to leave the rotations as they are. Hit the Tab key, right click again, hit Bevel Edges, and there we can see that it's acting far more appropriately. So now I'm going to interactively use the middle mouse click wheel to add additional faces to the surface and try to get something that looks right to me. I think that's probably fine right about there. Hit Tab again to see what it looks like. Now what you might notice is that this object appears very faceted. So does this one as well. Let's go ahead and go up to Object, and here you can see there's Smooth Shade and Flat Shade. If we select Smooth Shade, you can see that it's interpreting the object as smooth throughout. If we select this other object over here and also choose Smooth Shade, we're not going to quite get what we want. As you can see here, there are plenty of hard edges, and because it's trying to smooth on edges that are roughly 90 degrees, you end up with these large visual artifacts due to the fact that it's calculating light at this location and the next location, but it's averaging them together. So instead of the normal coming straight out of the surface as you would expect, it's got kind of a funny angle from being averaged with this 90-degree one over here, which causes this darkening effect. What we can do is try to use something like normals and auto smooth in the Object Data Properties panel. If I select auto smooth, I can choose an angle that I want to work with. In this case, I can lower that angle and we can get more hard edges, or I can increase that angle and then look to see which edges are actually being affected. In this case, I've got those bevels which are helping me out a little bit here. And as I increase this angle, you'll notice, there we go, around 51 degrees, I get nice smoothing across the edges, but I don't sacrifice the hard edges that we have on the inside, which reduces the number of visual artifacts and weird shading anomalies across the surface. Next up, we need to add some form of a slider. The slider itself is going to be composed of two different objects. But before we do that, once again, we should name things. So I'm going to go to my cylinder, double click on the cylinder, and I'm going to call this button instead. So let's go to Tab, Object Mode. I'm going to click Object, and let's come over here to Add and Mesh. I'm going to start with another cube right about here. I'm just going to arbitrarily move this off to the side, hit period on the number pad to zoom in, and we're going to go ahead and Shift Space. Now I'm going to move this down a bit and move this in a bit to create sort of the extents of my object. And I am going to take careful note of my resize over here this time. Let's say this is going to be a factor of 1, 0.25, and then 1 for this entire shape. Now that I have that shape, we can hit Control A, we can go to Apply, let's just do Scale in this case. And there we have it. Now I do want to round out this object a bit, but first I need the channel which the slider is going to slide within. So let's go ahead and hit Tab for Edit. Let's hit 3 for Face Mode, select the top, right click, and let's go ahead and do an inset. And we will inset this, well, some amount. Let's say that right there. Now I'm going to right click and we'll do an extrude. And I'm just going to extrude this down and in some arbitrary amount. This is negative 0. Let's just do negative 0.1. It's a nice number right there. Click, and we can see we have a central channel now. This is where the little bit that slides left and right is going to reside. I'm also going to be making that bit a separate object and snapping it on top of this one. And then in Unity, we're going to create the extents of that, which is basically 1 unit in length, and it'll be able to slide between the 2 values. So to create the object in the channel, we could use the channel itself to help us, but since we chose easy numbers in this case, we can pretty much do it by just going to Tab to get out of mesh mode, go to Add, Mesh, we'll add another cube in this case, and we know the dimension was 0.25. So I'm just going to select everything, go 0.25 right there. Whoops, that was location. Let's zero that back out for a second. The size, 0.25 right there. Great. I'm going to hit the G key and just arbitrarily move this close. Hit period to get it even closer. And now what we're going to do is actually probably want to move this pivot to the bottom of the object, or at least somewhere near the bottom of the object. I'm going to go ahead and go to Quad View, Control-Alt-Q in this case, come at it from the side angle you see over here, and I want to snap this down here. One thing we can try to do is use the 3D cursor to help us out. In fact, there's actually a hotkey or a selection you can use that automatically moves the pivot point to wherever the 3D cursor is. So let's go ahead and hit Shift and right-click, and we'll get the ability to move the 3D cursor. If you let go of Shift as well, and still hold down the right mouse button, the 3D cursor is still something you can manipulate. And what we can try to do now is actually use snapping in concert with selection constraints to get this to go exactly where we want. So in this case, we're going to say snap it to this bottom side over here. Now as we can see, it's snapped to the center point. Why? Because in my snap settings, I have edge center selected. All right, so that's going to snap to the center of that edge. However, I actually want this to be dead center in the box along the bottom face. So if I go ahead and hit Shift, and then of course right click over here, and what we want to do now is snap over to this side. So if I let go of the Shift key, and we note that that is probably going to be in the Y and X axis over here, we can have this move over to the side, and if we select this part over here, we'll notice that 3D cursor is actually going to snap into this location with respect to this side area. Now, how do we know that's correct? Well, we could try to align our box with the grid and work that way. That's one great way to do it. We can also go over to View, and under View we have the 3D cursor's actual locations in space. Now these locations are not going to make a whole lot of sense because we have an arbitrary cube at some location. So let's try this again. I'm going to hit the G key, all right? And instead, let's go to Snap, and I'm going to turn on Increment. I'm also going to turn on Absolute Grid Snapping, because more often than not, that's actually what I'm looking for. I'm looking to snap to the grid that's currently on the screen. If I hit the G key, you'll notice that this object is snapping based upon its central pivot. So if we move this somewhere that's going to be convenient for us, say like this spot right there, that looks about exactly where we want it on the grid. And if we come over here to the side and we take a look, we can also see how the grid's working here. It looks like we're pretty much centered up on that particular object. And we also take a look at our object here, and we can see a location. And actually, you know what? Let's just zero out that location now that I think about it. It's going to make it a lot easier for us to understand the numbers that we're dealing with. I can't see that object, but if I hit the period key, because I know I'm selected on it, I can see it there. Now it is inside the control panel, which is causing me some problems. So why don't we go ahead and hide the control panel? If we come over to the console over here and click on the little eye, that will cause it to temporarily disappear. Now I can click on the period button and focus in completely on this object. Now we can attempt to manipulate the pivot point. Now because we also know the dimensions of the object, we could as well move the pivot down to the bottom by doing one of two things. We could just move the object up, which will not move the pivot, but then we could set the pivot to be the center of the world, which is where we're working. There are usually dozens of different ways to accomplish the same task inside of Blender. Use whatever one makes the most sense based upon what it is you're currently doing. Moving it up is probably the easiest thing. So if I go to Z and we arbitrarily move this up, and we can see that 0.12. However, we know that this is 0.25 in size, so really it should be 0.125 in size. You can move it up exactly halfway, as we can hold down Shift and right click and snap our cursor to the middle part of the world. Then if we go to Object and Set Origin, you'll see we have a number of different choices. We could, for instance, move the origin to the geometry or the origin to the 3D cursor. Let's go ahead and click Origin to 3D Cursor. And you'll notice that it moves to wherever the 3D cursor was. So if we had used the first method where we manipulated the 3D cursor arbitrarily, we could move it to that location. And sometimes you don't have to be perfect. You can get it close enough. Or in this case, we used the grid as well as knowledge of the size of the object to snap it to the right location. Either one works well depending upon what kind of object you're making. If you're creating a human being, you probably won't have the ability to know that it's exactly 0.25 in the center of some object. In that case, you can use some of the snapping tools to snap along the different edges, sizes, and use constraining to get it very close, if not exactly dead on where you want it to be. Now that we've done that, we can go ahead, move this object over here onto this object here. So once again, I want to hit Control, Alt, and Q because we don't need that side view to see anything this time. And I can select my object. We can go ahead and hit Shift, Space, and then if we wanted to, we could choose Move, or we can just hit G if we want this arbitrary movement. But you'll notice that our snapping isn't set up correct. So let's hit Escape, come back over to snapping. I'm going to turn off Increment. I'm going to turn off Edge Center. I'm going to go to Face in this case. And let's just go to closest for now, or even center. Either one's fine for us. And now that we have this, I can hit G, and you'll notice that it's going to ride the surface of this object. And I might want it to snap properly right in the center, so I'm going to hit the period key. So now let's go ahead and try to get our object to snap onto the surface properly in the center. So I can click up here. Now you'll notice we have a line rotation to target. I actually don't want any of that right now. We have center, we have closest, we have face, we have edge. I'm going to turn on edge center for right now. I'm going to click and drag here and then select the center of this edge. And you'll notice now the object is perfectly sandwiched between either side, right in the center. And now is where you get to play around with this to make it look however you want to. I'm going to make this very simple. I'm going to hit the Tab key, and we're going to go to the edge mode by hitting 2, and then I'm going to hit Shift, Space, and then let's go to Move. I'm going to move this down to create a slider. Now I do have snapping on, that's annoying me, so I'm going to hit Shift Tab to get rid of that. And I'm going to move this somewhere along, maybe like that. We're going to do a very similar thing we did with the console. So let's go ahead to select it, hit 2, grab the edge, and we're going to right click. Now go ahead and bevel this. Whoops, that was an extrusion. Let's do a bevel edge instead. And you know what? That looks pretty good for a slider. Now we're never going to see the bottom of this slider. So let's go ahead to it. And I'm going to hit 3 key to select the bottom. I'm going to select this face. I'm going to go ahead and hit delete, and we're going to go to delete the faces. And now we have nothing down there. I do kind of want to bevel going along this side as well. Usually when I'm doing bevels, I like to select all the edges at the same time. I would normally go back in time and redo that, but in this case, it's such a simple object, I shouldn't have too much issue. So I'm going to hit the Tab key, 2 key, and I'm going to hit this. I'm going to hit that. I'm going to hold Alt and then select this next one, and it'll grab this entire loop right here. I'm going to hold down, let's see, Shift, and then Alt here, and that grabs that loop as well. I'm going to right click, bevel the edges on the surface, and get something that looks nice. Now it's a bit much. I'm going to maybe just do 1 by using the middle mouse drag. And there we go. We've got a nice little bevel. I'm also going to make this object over here look a little bit nicer. So let's go to edit mode on that, hit 2 on the keyboard. I'm going to select my edges. Once again, I can alt click to select the entire thing very quickly. And I'm going to go ahead and select these ones too using alt and shift at the same time to make a large selection. Now I have most of this selected. I'm going to go to right click, bevel edges, and here we go. So maybe something like that. And that looks kind of nice. Once again, we have that normal issue to deal with. So let's select our object, come over here, and choose Smooth Shade, and do the same thing here for this one, Smooth. But once again, let's modify those normals a bit by coming over to our surface, turning on Auto Smooth, and giving it a number probably comparable to that 45, 50-ish number we had before. And we're going to do the same thing over here on this object, just to make sure the correct edges are smooth and hardened. You'll notice that we didn't add a nice smooth edge there, so that one's not quite coming along for the normal ride. So there we go. That's probably good enough. And now we have our slider. Now I am going to move the slider's location. I'm going to hit the G key, and then I'm also going to hit the X key to constrain it to this direction. And we could use snapping if we want to, but I'm just going to get it close enough. We could also hit Control Alt Q afterwards, come at it from above, as you can see down here. G key this, Z snap, actually X snap in this case, and yeah, you know what? That's going to be good enough for us. So let's go ahead and hit Control Alt Q, come back here. Now I want to keep these objects together. We could use a parent-child relationship, or we could use a group. It's entirely up to you. So let's name this. So let's call this slider and underscore body. And then this one I'm going to just call slider. Now if I want to parent these together, I can select the child first, and then finally the object I'm going to parent it to. Then we can go to Object, Parent, and then Parent Object. What you'll notice is that the slider now becomes embedded underneath the slider body. Wherever the slider body moves, so shall the slider. Now let's go ahead and turn on our console, and here's our object right here. And we'll notice that our pivots aren't wonderful. We kind of want the pivot of this object to be here. So once again, why don't we just go ahead and zero out the location of our object and just move that to wherever we want it to be. If we hold down Control Alt and Q, come at this from a side view, as you can see right here, we can go ahead and hit the G key. And if we use snapping by hitting Shift Tab, and then we come up here and make sure we use increment as well, we'll turn off face and edge for the moment. We can snap this surface so that this bottom goes exactly across that area there. Let's go ahead and move this up, and you can see it snapping nicely. And then let's see, right there, it's in line with that particular axis. And now we can just, of course, move this to the world location, which is our 3D cursor. So we can go to Tab, Object, and then Set Origin, and then of course Origin to 3D Cursor. And now we have it right there, dead center in that object. Now all we need to do is once again use snapping to align the slider body to the surface of this object. So going back to snapping, opening this up, I'm going to go ahead and choose a face in this case, and let's go ahead and choose closest, and we do want to align it. So I'm going to hit the G key, and now you can see it moving around the surface of the object. I'm going to go ahead and move this, axis constrain, move this in the X-axis and choose, there we go, somewhere, yeah, let's choose maybe, that's a good snap, but it's the wrong direction. Actually, let's turn off orientation, right? So we'll come here and turn align to target off. And once again, click this, and now, bam, right there we have this part very much in the center of the entire console. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but if you manipulate the axes in different ways, you can pretty much align any object with any other one very accurately. Now the last thing we need to create is our handle. So let's go ahead and go to Add. For this, we're going to create a cylinder, extrude a little bit of the cylinder, and then create another cylinder that this object is going to go into, so we have sort of an area that rotates back and forth. So coming over, going to Mesh, let's go ahead and create our cylinder, and now let's go ahead. We have this at 12. I'm going to make this a little bit higher poly this time. Actually, no. Well, let's keep it at 12. This is going to be thinner than the button. So now we can change our radius, and you know what? That's probably about right. And now just our depth. And we'll do something like that. I hit the G key. I'm going to constrain it to the Z axis, or Z. Click right there. Come out from the bottom. And let's go ahead and grab the bottom of this by hitting Tab and 3 and pressing the bottom. We're going to right click, go to Inset. I want to inset that somewhere to that. I'm going to right click, go to Extrude, and let's bring this down a bit, somewhere like right around there, I would say. If I want to be a little bit more accurate, of course, we can come at this from the side. Jump on down here, make sure our axes are on. We want increment in this case. I'm going to turn off the rest of them. And now I can go ahead and move this so that it snaps to the grid exactly right there. This bottom piece we will never see, so we might as well go ahead and hit delete and delete that face. Now I need the part that rotates, the lever. This is the arm of it, but now we need the part that's going to be submerged into the console itself. So for that, we're going to create another one. Let's go ahead and go to Add, Mesh, and let's go ahead and create another cylinder. Now we could have added it going into edit mode and adding it directly to the mesh, but we're going to join these once we're done. And now we do need to rotate this. So let's just see which axis we want to rotate this on. And let's go with the Y axis, 90 degrees. Now we can go ahead and scale this down a bit. And once again, I only want to scale on one axis. So let's go ahead and hit Shift Z. And that's not, yeah, that's actually what I kind of want. So we're going to do maybe something like that. All right. That's pretty large. So actually, let's make that smaller. So let's go back to scale and shift, and let's see, Shift Z, and maybe somewhere like this. And now I need it thinner, so let's hit scale again, and let's hit the X direction. Let's hit Z, there we are. And maybe something like that. This piece and this piece need to be joined. So let's go ahead and get these a little bit closer to each other. Grab both of them, and I'm gonna go ahead and Control Alt Q, and let's go ahead and let's start by joining them, and then we'll manipulate them after. Go ahead and hit join, and now they're part of the same mesh. Hit Tab to go back to edit this object. Hit 1 for vertex mode, grab the vertices, and of course, we have snapping on, which is snapping by grid element. I'm gonna hit Shift Tab, turn that off. I'm just going to submerge that somewhere in, say, right around there. Now I am going to hit 2, and let's go ahead and Alt click this, Shift Alt click that side, right click and bevel these edges a bit, and then hit a space. Now once again, you're going to notice that bevel's acting kind of funny, and that's because of the weirdness of our scale. If we go ahead and hit Control A and hit Scale Apply, that'll be fine. I'm also going to hit Control A and do a rotation as well. Now we can go back, hit Tab, we have our selection still there, rotate, hit Bevel Edges, and there we go. It's acting a little bit more predictably. And we can do something like that. And if we also want to, we can add a central channel, which this lever arm seemed to have been a part of. And either the lever arm can rotate or the whole thing can rotate. It's really up to whatever you want to do. So let's go to edge mode in this case, actually, and right click and do a loop cut down that central point. And let's just choose, let's see, somewhere, it doesn't matter where, right there. If we right click, it'll go right to that center point, by the way. You don't have to move it. And we have the number of cuts. I'm going to make that 2. So I have 1 on either side. Go ahead and click off. I'm going to hit Alt-Shift-Click and Alt-Shift-Click. I'm going to hit S for scale. I'm going to go ahead and hit the X key to move this outwards somewhat. So I'm going to come along here. And I'm going to hold down Alt and click this to select the entire ring or loop across the entire object. We're going to right click and I'm going to do an extrude along faces. And I'm going to pull that in a bit, say just enough to give it something interesting. And now, of course, we can arbitrarily add additional bevels or whatever you see fit to make this object look a little bit better. I'm going to go to Bevel and give it something like maybe that. There we are. And now we have our lever. So I'm just going to take my object and move it off to the side somewhere over here. We'll take a look, and I'm going to just move this to maybe 1.9. Now we've got our 3 different objects. We do need to do a little bit of cleanup really fast. Check our names, check our scales, group everything together, and then we can export this out. So here we have cylinder. Let's just call this lever, or lever. There we are. We have our slider body. We have our lever. Our lever pivot looks fine because if we go to R for rotate, you can see that if we select, let's see, X, there we go. It'll be rotating like this. So we can put it somewhere we want to and then have it end somewhere else. Right now it'll go from there. And if we were to do a 90-degree rotation, it would go down to, say, right about there. So that's perfect for what we need. We've got this object, which has a good orientation coming straight out of the surface. Now the only thing I want to do is either make all these objects children of this central control or group everything together. For right now, let's just make all of these children. So I'm going to select this lever, this object, and then this object, and the last one here is going to be the console body. Once again, we'll go under Object, Parent, and Object. And now we'll see the console is the root of everything. However, I do want that console pivot point to be down, probably, actually, either down at the bottom or back at the top right here, or in this central location here. Either one would work for us. To do that, why don't we make smart use of our cursor over here? So let's use our 3D cursor to get our pivot exactly where we want it to be. I'm going to hold down Shift and right click. And what we'll notice is that I'm snapping right now to vertices. If we come up here, you can see I have vertex mode on. It was fortuitous of us to have added these vertices early on. If we come over here and choose X-ray mode, we can see some of the different objects, but really what we want is a wireframe. Now the wireframe here, even if we select off the object, we're still going to get a silhouette of all the edges. And that shows us that we have this seam right here down the center, and we can use that to better pivot our cursor. If I hold down Shift and right click, you'll notice because I have center of edges selected under snap here, edge center, you'll see that it snaps right there. And that's actually a pretty good spot for this to be, either here or down here or up here, whatever ends up working for you. I'm going to choose this spot right here. I think that works well for us. So now we'll go to Object, Set Origin, Origin to 3D Cursor. Whoops. Make sure we have the object selected first, of course, and Origin to 3D Cursor. And now our origin is right there. Now we can select 0 for this, and it will move exactly to 0, 0, 0 in our location. That's kind of where I like my origin of my object to be, so I don't gain any transforms when I move back to my other program. Now we have this entire object set up. Let's just go through and make sure everything works fine. So we have our console, and of course the mesh, we have the button, we have the lever, and we have the slider body. So now we want to make sure this object is using the same material everywhere. If we select the outer body, we can see console M here. Let's select the lever arm. Let's go ahead and click down this drop down and make sure we choose console. come down to button, do the same thing, and it looks like we're good there. Now we just need to set up our UVs. We can do this by going to the UV editing workspace. Within this workspace, we can see over here our 2D view of the layout, and then of course our 3D view of our object here. We'll be jumping back and forth to make sure everything works. I am going to go ahead and click this interactive view, which allows us to see all the vertices we're manipulating at the same time. I want to select everything, and then I'm going to hit tab so I edit everything at the same time. It's up to you how you want to work. You can either do it one bit at a time by selecting and hitting tab, or selecting everything and hitting tab to see them all here. Let's start with the button. Button's pretty simple, and in fact, we probably don't need to do much at all to make this work. My usual workflow is to get rid of all the existing UVs, so I'm just going to move them off to the side. I want to click UV up here. I'm going to do project from view. Now this might seem kind of funny, but what I'm going to do is just get some UVs down here that are separate and refreshed from everything else. Now I can hit 2 key to select the edge, hit Alt to select the entire ring, and then what we can do is right click and actually create a seam at that location, mark seam. The great thing about seams is it records where you want cuts to be later on in your object. Now that I have a seam, what I can do is make a cut at that seam location. On my object over here, if we were to hit 3 and then A for select all, I could go to UVs and click unwrap. That's going to use my seams to unwrap the object and rip it apart over here. Now you'll notice that this part looks pretty nice. That's the front part. However, this side part, not so much. We need to add a cut somewhere so that this can unfurl and become a completely straight object. The reason why we typically like objects to be straighter when doing UVs is because the pixels on our texture map are square. Therefore, getting them to line up as closely as possible is going to make our outcome, our texture that we create, look better. So let's go ahead and choose 2. Just click somewhere, and here you're probably not going to see the top of this button right here. So if I come here, right click and make that a seam, and then we go ahead and hit 3 on the keyboard, I select one of the faces, I can use L to select the islands, or a linked pick as it's called here, to select the entire thing. We can right click and do an unwrap, and you can see now that that went from that odd circle shape to a perfectly laid out line that I can work with. Now let's go to the next object. Let's click on the handle. Now the handle, we still have to mess with the UV. Now the handle, we still have some normal problems. So let's fix that very quickly by going to Object and choosing Smooth, going back down to our normals, turning on Auto Smooth, and probably adjusting this to somewhere in the 50s. This way we get the hard edges on the bottoms here, but these areas and surfaces look nice. Now we could come in here and lower this a bit if we wanted to until we got something we like, or we could go in there and actually cause hard edges in different spots. It's up to you. For instance, I really might like a hard edge going on this outer loop right here and this one right here. I can grab either of those, right click, and instead of marking a seam, I can do something like mark sharp. Now you'll notice that the normals on the surface are hard edged. It is overriding the smoothness parameter over here. And many times you'll want to do that to define your shape exactly as you wish. And really that top, I wouldn't mind being smooth as well. So let's go ahead and click 2, edge, alt, click, and then right click and go to bevel and add just a little bevel, maybe something like that to the arm. Now once again, you'll never see from this bottom side, so I'm not going to bother smoothing that part. And of course, you can make this more interesting if you want to. You could click on this face, right click, do an inset, and then do an extrude. And we could hit right click and let's do along normal. Bring that up almost like it's its own little button right there. And I could right click and we could bevel just that selected part. If we go to 2, right click, bevel edges, and add its own little bevel right there. And already our object looks more interesting. And of course, the more interesting the object looks, the more likely you are to say, oh boy, how am I going to unwrap this? But any object, no matter how complicated, can easily be unwrapped. And in fact, most of it's kind of okay. Let's hit 3, grab everything, hit G, move this off to the side, then go to UV. Let's go ahead and do a projection from view so that we get everything kind of laid out as we see here. Now we can go to 2 mode, we can do an alt click selection, right click, and we can start adding our seams. We can mark a seam here, put a mark a seam here. And marking out seams is one of those things where it just takes time. You gotta look at it and figure out where the best place to put seams. If I want to flatten this thing on circular objects, finding the cylinder part, making cuts at the top and the bottom, and then adding one that goes down the side, like right here, is usually the best way, because if you can think about it interactively, this part and this part are going to rip off, and then they're going to flatten out into just a roll, almost like if you took a roll of toilet paper, right? The cardboard piece, and split it in half and just unrolled it outwards. This is going to come out okay. And usually I will also mark most of my seams all at the same time. So I'll come here, I'll right click, and I'll add the base set of seams based upon how I think this thing will unwrap. And I'll add this one. Let's go ahead and make another seam up there. And this part will be fine, and I'll probably want something here. So right click, mark seam, and then coming down the bottom, this part here, once again, we could make a cut here, or we could leave it together. It just depends on how you want it. I'm gonna cut it. And I want to, let's see, we could try to unfurl this, but it's probably not going to come out very well. We'll leave it as is. Now this part here, we definitely need to unfurl. So we'll, not sharp, let's make a seam. There we are. And then this part here, we get to kind of pick. I'm going to pick maybe this line here. See, right there. And this line here, right click and mark a seam as well. And that's going to cut out this central part. Now we do have some geometry on the inside that we probably will never use, but it's okay. Let's zoom in and let's just make a seam, I'm thinking along this edge here. So I'll click, alt click right there, right click and mark that as seam as well. All right, so let's see what we get. So if we select the entire object, I'm gonna hit 3A, right click, unwrap. As you can see, you can get pretty fast. You'll notice what that seam tried to do right there, but we failed to add seams here and here. So I'm actually gonna hit the G key and move them sort of off. And let's actually right click and let's see, I think we have to be in edge mode, right click, and I'll mark a seam along that as well. And now we can hit A, right click and unwrap, and now you'll see things coming across much better. We've got these two parts here and here, which are the sides. We've got this area right here. If we click on this and hit L, you can see it's that side. We probably have this side as well over there, and then we have the central strip right there, which is coming out very nicely. Now, different applications will have different ways of unwrapping things, and sometimes you'll need to add arbitrary cuts in different places to kind of make things unfold. If you take a look at how this object is created, you'll notice we have this bevel on one side, right? If we zoom in, you can see it's right there, or actually right there is kind of the trouble piece that's really causing some issues. And if we wanted this to flatten out a bit, we probably could introduce our own cuts somewhere along here, and then we'd have two long pieces. However, the length of this piece is also giving us problems because it's going to try to map the UVs one-to-one. That is, height and width are the same. So if we were to add an arbitrary cut, say somewhere around the center point, like here, right click, and we can go ahead and let's see. Let's right click and add a seam, and then come over here and click on this part. Actually, let's hit 3, grab this, hit L, whoops, how about U, L, G, move this. Now we can go to 2, grab this edge right here, and then we can right click over here, mark that as a seam, and then we can hit the 3 key, grab these two. I'm going to hit L, and then right click and unwrap, and that will break them down into not as long seams that can become wider and have more textiles. We can do the same thing over here on this part. Alt click, come over here, right click. I like to mark seams just to make sure that things work right when I go to unwrap different objects. Hit the L key, right click, unwrap, and now we have 2 strips that are twice as thick as before. Now that we have most of this object laid out, let's just take a quick sanity check and make sure all the pieces are working. So this is the top part, fanning out, that's fine. This is going to be our, let's hit L. This is going to be the bottom part, that is okay. This is another part, this is another top part. Let's hit L on that and see what it is, that's fine. Here we have that piece, then here we have, let's see, that entire part right there. So we'll grab everything this time, right click, and let's go ahead and do another unwrap. As you can see, everything gets laid out. And what we can also do is go to UV, and we can also go to A, UV, and then we can do pack islands, and it's going to try to pack them. And if you already unwrapped it, it probably already did a good job at that. We can go to pack islands though, and we need to change our margin. And that's going to depend upon whatever the scale of our texture happens to be. Now, I'm going to just kind of wing this right now. So here, that margin's huge. Let's do 0.01 instead. And what we're looking at is enough of a gap between these objects so that we don't get strange artifacts in Unity due to mip-mapping. This should be okay for what we're working on. Now, I'm going to actually go over to my circle really fast, and in this case it didn't matter, we didn't lay anything out. And the reason why I really shouldn't matter yet is because we need to grab everything together, right-click, and then we're going to need to lay these out properly over here by going to UV, and we're going to go to Pack Islands. And they're packing everything together in this case into the same UV space. Let's go ahead and do our slider now. Hitting Tab key, we can see the slider is a bit of a mess. I'm going to hit period to zoom in on some aspect of this object. And we could hit the A key and UV. Let's just do project from view. And now let's add some cuts. And once again, how you add cuts is completely dependent upon how much experience you have. Here, I think adding a cut down these sides will cause this entire thing to unwrap easily. So right click, mark a seam. And then if I hit the A key and we can go to unwrap, you can see what happened. We got both sides there and we got this piece over here, and it's all relatively well done. Next up, let's go ahead and select the body. Go ahead and hit tab, and we can see this is a bit of a mess from the bevels. Let's go ahead once again and hit A, UV, and I'm going to do a project from view, and let's just add some seams. I'll go down to 2, Alt key, and Alt key, and Alt Shift, whoops. Alt Shift there and Alt Shift there. And I missed that one. There we are. So those are where I'm going to make my cuts. Let's see how this works. So right click, I'm going to mark a seam. I'm going to go ahead and let's hit 3A, and let's go ahead and just do a unwrap. And we can see I didn't quite do a great job, and that's because I need something to slice up this central region right here. It didn't know how to unwrap it because everything's connected in this area. So let's go ahead and click Tab 2, and I'm going to hit Alt and grab that entire thing. Let's go ahead and mark a seam. Coming back over here, we can go ahead and unwrap that object, and then hit L, right click, unwrap this one as well. And now we're getting much closer. However, it looks like I left the back side of this object still alive or on there. So I'm going to go ahead and select this face by clicking 3 and hitting delete face. And now that central part disappears, and depending upon whether or not these vertices are still linked together, this will either unwrap very nicely or we'll have to go in there and cut it ourselves. And it looks like it unwrapped very nicely, as we can see here. Each of the different controls are over there. So now we have this one, and we have this one, and we have the button, and we have this. Now we just have the central console left. So let's once again come over here, hit Tab, go to UV, and let's do a project from view on the entire object when we actually have it selected. UV, project from view, come back over here, start thinking about where our seams are going to be. I'm going to select a seam, I'd say around the central area in here. It's kind of what I'm interested in. And let's do that one right there. Right click and mark a seam. And then we might want a seam coming out from this edge or not. We will definitely want one here. So I'm going to hit 3, grab this face, hit 2, right click, mark as a seam, and then we'll go to the other side, 3, click, right click, or hit 2 to go back to edges, right click, and do a mark as seam. And that will get rid of those and that central face. But we've still got the back side of this, and that's probably the best place to introduce some seams. What you need to understand about seams is that from time to time, they are going to give you problems. In fact, let's select that one and that one. And what I mean by that is where you add seams can sometimes cause issues with your texture tiling or looking right, depending upon what you're doing. Let's right click and mark that seam. So now this can come apart here, but we've still got to make a decision on these edges to figure out how to unroll this entire thing. If you think about UV editing as, well, as origami, it usually makes a lot more sense in your head as you're doing this. So let's select this one. I'm going to hit Shift and select that one. Let's extend that seam just a bit. And now with that extended, we can come up the side of this object here and here, and here and here. And you don't have to get it right first. So I'm going to do that cut along the side of the object. And now I can see how this is going to start to unfurl. I can select this one as well, and I'm going to select this one and right click, mark seam there. Excuse me, that was sharp. Let's do seam. And that should be better. Let's take a look at what's going to happen. So let's come over here, hit 3, hit L, right click, unwrap, and we're getting there. We've got these two side triangles, we've got this central area here. And really, there's nothing saying that we can't just tear this off as well, although we might want these elements with it. So what we could do is grab these faces here, and these ones come back over here. And then if we hit 2, right-click, and do a mark seam, we can have that cut out as well. Now we do have this little tiny edge here, and it might be better for us to actually get rid of this seam now that I'm looking at it. So let's go ahead and hit 2, select this edge, right-click, and let's clear that seam. Let's do the same thing over here. And yeah, it might be better to make a few small changes to how I'm doing this. So there's that. So let's try a L on this thing, right click and unwrap. Okay, so that's what we got. So we've got this bit here and this bit here, which are the back pieces, which can also be torn off. There's no real reason to keep them there. So once again, coming over here to mark, not mark sharp, mark seam. There we are. Well, notice we have the seam down the center line, which I don't want as well. So let's just click that and clear that seam. Much better. Come back over here, hit L, right click, unwrap this, and now the back is torn off just fine. So let's hit L, G, and we don't want to do that. It's sharing things, that's fine. What we can do is let's go to face mode. I'm going to grab these two, hit the G key, and move that over there. We've got this bit over here and this bit over here. One way we can handle that is just by hitting 3, and I'm going to go ahead and grab the elements that I kind of want to keep together. Now, if I hit L instead and hit G, I can move this off the grid, and then I can move over here, and we can start playing with how we want this to work. So I could grab these two pieces here, tear them off, hitting the G key and moving them off. I could come here, grab these ones and these ones, hit the G key, move them off. And then we could do similar things. And really, it's up to you for how far you tear this thing apart. That's probably more than adequate for what I'm trying to do. What we can do now is right click, and we can go ahead and if we unwrap it, this is a basic mistake that most people make. If we unwrap it and we haven't made these things seams, it's going to recombine them. So don't do that unless you go through and grab these elements over here, right? And then right click and then mark as a seam. The problem is though, it's going to seam everything. You just want the outer edge actually selected to make that work. What I'm going to do though is instead of doing all that, let's just come over here and select 3. I'm going to go in here and actually let's do 2. And I want to see if I can't select this entire outer part. So there we go. Right click, and I'm going to mark that as a seam. Now that I've done that, if I hit right click and unwrap, actually let's hit 3 and select this part, just that part, make sure we have it, and hit the U key to unwrap, we just unwrap that piece. And you can see now that that's just fine. Let's grab this one, hit U to unwrap, G to move it off. I'm just going to go through and unwrap these. Hotkey U, then move it off. Grab it, U, G, and UG, 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 and let's get this final piece here, UG. Okay, now we've got some parts. Let's just grab the whole thing now, right click, and we can go ahead and go to UV. And what we want to do is I'm going to average the island sizes so that they're set up right. Then we're going to go to pack islands. Let's go ahead and grab everything and pack them once again, because I need to make sure that I have enough of a gap between the elements. We still have that at 0.01, and it's looking just fine. Now we could come back in here and probably make quite a few changes. Like these little orphaned pieces right here could really be recombined back in if you'd like them to. It's entirely up to you and how dedicated you are to making the UVs perfect. But for right now, I think this is pretty good. We just need to make sure all the different elements together are in the same UV space. So I'm gonna hit Tab while selecting everything. Go ahead and hit A to grab everything. Let's go to UV and let's go ahead and to Pack Islands. And here we can see the entire layout for our object. And looking at this, 0.01 is a bit high. So let's have that to somewhere around there. And that's not so bad. Now do a sanity check. Go ahead and select some different parts or elements and make sure that they're relatively one-to-one size with everything else going on. And this looks pretty good. Now that we've done that, we have our pivots set up properly, we have our object in a good space, we have everything parented, and we also have things properly named. Let's make sure we save our scene before we lose it. And I'm going to save this as console.blend. And let's go ahead and save this. Now normally you would have a project folder, so let's go ahead and right click, go to new folder, and I would call this Blender. And let's go ahead and put that under here and save the Blender file. Now it's time for us to export our object out. So I'm going to go in and select everything, go to File, and go to Export. I want to do an FBX object. And inside of these parameters, I'm going to choose Selected Objects. I'm also going to make sure it's only a mesh. And we're going to leave all these as it is, and I'm going to hit Apply Transform. Now one thing I'm going to do is open up the Geometry tab and take a look inside. And what you'll notice is it says, what other information am I going to be exporting? There's an Apply Modifiers, to where if you're using modifiers to post, make changes to your objects in post, I don't use that, so I'm going to get rid of that. I want to also choose Add Tangent Vectors for this object. Now let's go ahead and hit Export FBX. And what we'll notice is a series of different errors. And it's saying we have sides with more than 4 vertices. What we can do is before we export, we can add a modifier to this object. So let's come on over here to our modifier, click on that, and what we'll notice is a Triangulate Modifier. We have a few different options here. I want to set it to be fixed and a size of 4. You'll notice that I'm in wireframe mode, so I can actually see the outcome of what I'm doing. Here you can see it's slicing this object right down the side right here. And let's go ahead to our other objects and make sure we triangulate them as well. And I'm going to use the same setup as before. Let's go to our lever arm now, choose Triangulate, choose Add Modifier, Triangulate again. Just going to choose Fixed, Beauty, Keep Normals, and then go to our slider body, click here, Triangulate, go to Fixed, Beauty, and 4, Fixed, Beauty 4. I'm going to do Keep Normals for these ones, Fixed, Fixed, and Fixed. And we're going to open up the slider body now and go to the slider itself. And let's triangulate that as well and choose what we want. There we are. And here we are. I've now triangulated my entire mesh and everything looks, well, about right. Oh wait, we forgot our lever. Let's make sure we do that. And triangulate and fixed. Keep normals. All right, just take one final look at it and I don't see anything bad. We know our UVs are set up, so let's go ahead and do an export. So let's go to File, Export, Export FBX, and come back to Mesh. This time I'm going to turn Selected off. I've got nothing else in my scene, so it really doesn't matter. And let's go ahead and try another export. Now it's still complaining, and this is because I'm not applying my modifiers. So let's go to File, Export, FBX, come down here, under Geometry, choose Apply Modifiers. Go to Console and hit Export FBX. Now we have no errors, and we need to check to make sure that our console looks appropriate. So we'll go to Start. Let's go ahead and load up Substance Painter, load it in, and if it's successful, we will stop here and we'll pick up in the next video where we paint our console. So now once Substance Painter is loaded, go to File, New, choose PBR Metallic Roughness, 2048, OpenGL, select, and let's go find our project console.fbx. Make sure you choose a document resolution that is acceptable for your hardware. You may want this to be 1024 or 512 if you're using a computer that does not have a discrete graphics card. Once that's finished, hit OK. It will load our model here and do a sanity check. And you'll notice that we do have an issue. This object right here has its normals inverted. So we need to go back in Blender and fix that and then re-export things out. So let's click on this icon right here, Show Overlays. And what we'll notice is there's a Face Orientation button. And we'll see that this part is turned red, indicating that it's actually facing the wrong direction. Let's go ahead and select this object. We now have our button selected. Let's hit Tab and let's hit A to select everything. I'm going to go to Mesh, Normals. I'm going to go to Flip. And that seems to have fixed things just fine. So now coming back out, we can go to File, Export, FBX, back to our console, hit Export. Now we jump back over to Substance Painter. We can go to Edit, Project Configuration, and go to Select. This allows us to select the mesh again after updates have been made, and we don't have to actually worry about creating a new project. Let's hit OK. And now we see our button is actually set up properly. Now there's one last check we should do just to make sure everything's coming in properly. Let's go to Texture Set Lists. We only have one. It's called Console M. Everything's fine. Under Texture Sets, let's go ahead and bake our mesh maps. We're not going to change anything in this video, that's the next video. We just want to bake it and make sure that we don't see any abnormalities or any weirdness going on with our object. Now that it's been baked, just take a quick look around the object and see if things look all right. Not seeing anything terribly bad at the moment, so this looks good. That means we can stop modeling and start painting in the next video.